We're at the feeder this morning, and something is different. Not outside, inside. The coffee's the same, the yard is the same. The light through the window is the same pale gray it always is at this hour. But you are not the same. There's something in your chest, a weight from last night, a worry you woke with. The kind that doesn't announce itself, but sits there regardless. You fill the feeder the way you always do. And the birds, the sparrows, the chickadees, the cardinal on the lower branch, they don't come. Or they come differently. They pause at a distance they don't normally keep. They watch you. And for just a second, if you're honest, you notice it. You just don't know what it means yet.
Most people assume birds react to movement, to noise, to sudden gestures. The common understanding is that if you stay still and quiet, the birds will come. And if they don't, you must have spooked them somehow. That's not wrong exactly, but it's incomplete in a way that changes everything once you understand it. Birds are not responding to your movement alone. They are reading you, your posture, your pace, your body's chemistry expressed through the invisible signals your stress response sends out into the yard around you. The idea that you could carry something emotionally into a space and have animals detect it without a word, without a sound, sounds like projection. It sounds like the kind of thing people say when they love birds a little too much. But it isn't. And the science behind it is far stranger than the feeling.
Start with what birds can actually see. The visual system of most backyard birds far exceeds ours in both acuity and field coverage. A chickadee's eye covers nearly 300 degrees without turning its head. But it's not just field of view. It's what birds have learned to read within that field, specifically the human body as a source of threat information. Research from the University of Bristol, published in 2013 in PLOS One, demonstrated that common garden birds adjust their flight initiation distance, the distance at which they decide to flee, based on whether a human is looking directly at them. Eye contact alone changes the calculation. A person walking toward a feeder while looking at the ground triggers a different response than the same person walking the same path while looking at the birds. The direction of your gaze is a signal, and birds read it.
But gaze is just the beginning. The way you move through your yard carries information that birds process before you've come anywhere near them. Research from the University of Melbourne, published in Animal Behavior in 2015, found that individual variation in human walking speed, shoulder posture, and directional unpredictability all influenced how Australian magpies assessed threat level. The birds didn't need to be approached. They updated their threat assessment from a distance based entirely on body language cues. What this means for your yard: when you walk outside carrying tension, moving faster than usual, shoulders raised, your path less deliberate, birds register that signature.
It doesn't read to them as, "this person is stressed." It reads as, "something in this environment has changed, and changed environments require caution." What comes next explains why that caution can last longer than the moment itself. Here is the part that most people don't expect. Your emotional state may be leaving a chemical trace in your yard. When your body is under stress, real stress, the kind that keeps you up, the kind that settles into your shoulders, it produces cortisol. That hormone affects your sweat, your breath, and the microscopic particles that leave your body as you move through space. Birds, it turns out, are exquisitely sensitive to chemical signals in their environment.
A 2020 study from the University of Tours, published in Scientific Reports, found that European starlings exposed to human stress-related chemical cues altered their foraging behavior, becoming more vigilant, spending less time at food sources, and increasing their scan rate. The birds weren't seeing danger. They were smelling its possibility, and they changed what they did because of it.
This gets more layered. Birds don't just detect stress signals in others. They carry their own stress chemistry. And your presence, your energy, your behavioral signature in the yard
can actually trigger a corticosterone response in the birds themselves. Corticosterone is the avian equivalent of cortisol, the primary stress hormone in birds. Research across multiple species, including work published by the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology as recently as 2019, shows that proximity to a perceived threat, even a mild, chronic, non-aggressive one, elevates baseline corticosterone in wild birds over time. A feeder that is approached irregularly, unpredictably, or by someone whose body language reads as agitated can become a mild stressor for the birds that rely on it. They still come, but they come differently, faster, watching more, eating less per visit. A feeder should feel safe, and safety, to a bird, is something it reads off you.
Had you ever noticed the yard going quieter on a hard morning? Christopher Templeton at the University of Washington spent years mapping the alarm call system of the black-capped chickadee, work published in Science in 2005. What he found was that chickadees encode threat-specific information into their calls with a precision that approaches language. The number of D notes at the end of a chickadee DDD call indicates the threat level of whatever the bird is responding to. Larger predators get fewer notes. Smaller, more agile predators, the ones that can actually catch a chickadee, get many more.
What this means in your yard: when you arrive outside in a state that reads as behaviorally inconsistent, the chickadees recalibrate. Not with full alarm, with something subtler. A shift in call frequency. A change in how many birds stay near the feeder versus pull back into cover. The yard gets quieter. And now you know why. Crows take this further than almost any other bird in your yard. John Marsloff at the University of Washington, whose crow research spans more than 2 decades, demonstrated in a 2012 paper published in Animal Cognition that American crows not only recognize individual human faces, but hold emotional associations with those faces across years. In the original studies, crows were captured by researchers wearing specific masks. Those crows subsequently scolded anyone wearing those masks, not just immediately, but months and years later. And they recruited other crows to do the same, passing the emotional valence of that face through the local flock. Now scale that to your yard. If your crows have associated your face or your behavioral signature on a particular kind of morning with agitation, unpredictability, or threat, that information doesn't disappear. It persists. It may spread. The question is what kind of association you've been building, one morning at a time. Crows are not alone in this. Research from the University of Florida, published by Douglas Levy and colleagues in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2009, demonstrated that northern mockingbirds nesting in urban areas can recognize and respond differently to specific individual humans who have approached their nests. The birds didn't respond to all humans. They escalated their responses specifically to the person who had previously come close, even when that person dressed differently, approached from different angles, or arrived among a group. The recognition was of the individual. What this means, the birds in your yard are not seeing a generic human at a feeder. They are seeing you. They are building a model of you over time. Your schedule, your pace, your typical behavior. And when your behavior deviates from that model, they notice. Deviation from a known pattern is the first thing a prey animal learns to track. Think about the sparrow that was at the feeder last Tuesday, the one that stayed while you refilled the seed, closer than sparrows usually come. It probably remembers that morning, not the way you remember it. Not with narrative, not with language, but with something that Cambridge University researcher Nicola Clayton calls episodic-like memory. Clayton's studies on western scrub jays, ongoing since 1998 and published across multiple journals, including Nature, showed that these birds encode not just what happened, but where and when. The 3 coordinates of episodic memory that were once thought to belong only to humans. They remember specific caching events in specific locations at specific times. Applied to your yard birds, the feeder, the morning, your presence, the emotional signature of that moment,
These are being encoded in a form of memory that persists. The birds that come back tomorrow are, in some functional sense, remembering yesterday.
This is where the research stops being purely about what birds can detect and starts being about what you can offer. A study from the University of Exeter, published in PLOS One in 2018, examined how garden birds respond to predictable versus unpredictable feeding schedules and human presence patterns. Birds in yards where human presence was consistent and behaviorally regular, same times, same movements, same general tempo, showed lower baseline corticosterone levels, shorter flight initiation distances, and higher rates of return feeding. They were calmer. Not because the humans were calmer by nature, but because their pattern was readable. Readability is what birds need from you. They don't require stillness, they require legibility.
A bad day, walked through at your ordinary pace, in your ordinary way, that they can read and file. It's the unpredictability that costs them, and costs you the yard. Go back to that feeder this morning. The weight you carried outside with you, it was real. The birds that held their distance were real. And now you understand what was actually happening in that space. They weren't rejecting you. They were reading you, accurately, as something that had changed. They had a model of you, built over weeks and months of ordinary mornings. And this morning, that model didn't quite fit the data. So they paused. They watched.
They waited to see if the pattern would resolve. That is not indifference. That is attention. The kind of attention that most humans don't receive from other humans without asking for it. Your birds have been watching you carefully enough to know when something is off. The yard outside your window is not a backdrop to your life. It is a community of minds that has been quietly paying attention to yours.
There is a dimension to this that researchers are only beginning to formalize, and it may be the most disquieting part of all. European starlings, long studied for their extraordinary flock coordination, have been found in research from the University of Turin, published in PLOS One in 2011, to exhibit what the authors describe as emotional contagion. When a stressed bird is introduced into a flock, measurable behavioral shifts propagate through the group. Vigilance increases, play decreases, feeding efficiency drops. The emotional state of one bird becomes, in a diffuse but real sense, the emotional state of the flock. The implications for your yard extend in both directions.
A stressed human at a feeder may not only alter the birds directly present, it may propagate through the social network of birds that roosts nearby, that signals to others, that adjusts the ambient mood of the local bird community. You are part of their ecology.
Birds don't read you in isolation. They read you as a feature of the landscape, one of several inputs they use to assess whether a territory is safe. Research published by Arco van Strien and colleagues in Ecological Indicators in 2017 examined how the presence and behavior of humans in urban green spaces correlated with bird species richness and density. Yards and parks where humans moved in predictable, calm patterns supported more species, more nesting attempts, and higher bird density than equivalent spaces with erratic or high-frequency human traffic, even when the physical habitat was otherwise identical. The birds were not just tolerating the humans. They were using human behavioral patterns as a proxy for environmental stability. If the humans in a space are calm and consistent, the space itself registers as safer. You are, functionally, part of the habitat assessment your birds are running every morning. What you do in your yard compounds. Corticosterone levels in wild birds are not just responses to individual events, they accumulate. Research from Princeton University, published in Hormones and Behavior in 2012, showed that repeated low-level stressors in a bird's territory, the kind that don't trigger full flight responses but do register as mild, persistent threat, produce hormonal priming that makes the bird more reactive to subsequent stressors. Each small disruption lowers the threshold for the next one. Applied to your feeder, a week of rushed, tense morning visits doesn't reset each day. It builds a baseline. The birds in your yard in November are partly a product of every morning you've spent in that yard since spring. They are not forgiving or unforgiving. They are simply accurate. They have been tracking you for longer than you know, and the record is written in their nervous systems.
So what do you actually do with this? Begin with consistency. Choose one time of day to be at the feeder. Not because birds require exactness, but because a recognizable pattern gives them something to orient to. Move at your ordinary pace, whatever that is. The goal isn't performance of calm, it's the elimination of behavioral noise. If you've had a hard morning, walk out anyway, but walk the way you walk when you're not thinking about it. Let the body do what it knows. Second, sit. Not to watch necessarily, just to be in the yard with no agenda.
Research from the University of Exeter's European Garden Bird Study found that extended stationary human presence, when not directed at the birds, was associated with shorter approach distances and higher feeder visit frequency within a single session. Your stillness is information. It says, the environment has stabilized.
New video every week. I'll see you in the yard. If this one stayed with you, the next place to go is the video on what happens to your birds during the night, how they sleep, what they hear, and what their brains are doing in the hours before they come to your feeder in the morning. Because some of what they know about you, they may be consolidating in the dark. That video is linked at the end of this one. And if you've noticed something at your feeder, a bird that comes closer on certain mornings, one that holds back, a change in the yard you couldn't quite explain, leave it in the comments. Not because I have a definitive answer for every observation, but because 100 people noticing the same thing in 100 different yards is how patterns become visible. What have your birds been telling you on the mornings when you weren't quite yourself?